Now up to this point, we always added the addition or removal of just one element. I mean, even with the two buttons here, it was about having just one button active on the page at the same time. But sometimes you also have lists of data which you want to animate. So you have multiple list items and you might want to animate this. And thankfully, Vue got you covered for that as well. I'll add a new component, listData.view. The name, of course, is up to you. And I'm just using that new component to keep the code split up and keep it manageable, since AppView is already a large component with a lot of code in there. So listData.view is a simple component. We'll have an unordered list in there, and we'll have a little bit of dummy list data in our component object here. Now it's up to you which data you want here. I will have a user's key and have Max, Manu, Julie, Angela, and Michael here as names, but you can of course add as many names as you want. Now my goal is of course to output those items here in a list, so we can use v4 to loop through the users, so user in users, also add a key and point at user, since we have unique values in there, and output the username here then. So it's a very simple list. It also doesn't have any fancy styling at the moment. Now we can go to AppView and import it here as a local component, for example. So let's quickly import list data, or actually let's name it users list. Makes a bit more sense, I guess. So let's import users list from /components users list.view. And then as you learned it and did it multiple times in the course, we can register it as a local component here, users list. And now that it is imported and registered, maybe here at the very top, we can add a new div with class container and then render our users list component here, the newly added component. And with that, we got our users list up here. Now let's add a little bit of styling to make it look a little bit nicer. In the users list.view file, we can add a scoped style tag here. And on the unordered list, I'll set list style to none to remove the bullet point, set the margin to 0 and the padding to 0. And every individual list item is then styled by giving it a border of 1 pixel, solid, and a light gray color, and a padding of 1 rem. And I'll set text align here to center the text. And now that is the list we have here. Now this is a very simple list, and at the moment it's not animated at all. Let's make sure we can now add and remove items to it, and then let's make sure that we can animate this, because that's something that's missing in all the examples we saw throughout this course. So to make sure new items can be added, in userslist.view, in the template below my unordered list, I'll add another div here, simply as a wrapper, and then have an input element here of type text, and a button where I say add user. And the idea, of course, is that we take whatever was entered here and add it as a user to users. And on the other hand, if a list item is clicked, that user should be removed. So I'll add a click listener to a list item and say remove user here and pass the user as an argument to remove user. And on this button, on the other hand, I'll add a click listener and say add user. We could also use a form here if we wanted to, but I'll just add a good old click listener on this button. So now we can add methods and add an add user method and a remove user method. And on remove user, we'll get the user name. We're passing it here as an argument, so we get it here as a parameter. And we can then set this user's equal to this user's filter, searching for the user that is equal to the user we're getting here. So if we got a user that's equal to the user we're currently looking at, we want to filter it out actually by inverting this, so that we keep all users where the names are not equal to the user we're getting here, and if the name is equal, we return false. Hence we filter it out, and therefore our new users is the old array minus the user with the username we got here. In add user, we want to get what the user entered here, and I'll use a ref for that. Username input is my ref, which I'll use here. And in add user, we got the entered username by reaching out to this refs username input.value. We could add validation, but I want to keep it simple, and therefore simply push my entered username to users. And actually, I'll not push it, I'll unshift it to add it at the top. Now with that, if we reload, if I click Julie, she's removed. If I add Julie again, she's back at the beginning. And we can also add some spacing here by going back to the unordered list and actually adding a margin of 1 rem top and bottom, 0 left and right by adding this rule here. So now we got this in place. You can of course optimize the styling, but I rather want to focus on animating now. I want to ensure that we animate when an item is removed or added. And that is something we can do with Vue.